As our state reopens and people head back to the workplace, some people are going to face some new challenges. I spoke to Sheryl Ellis, who's an ADA and HR facilitator, about how a new wave of employees could be eligible for special accommodations. Here's a look.
People are more at risk who have health conditions to be at work or be exposed to certain kind of conditions. So what it causes people to do that have health conditions, they need to be at home or they need to have extra protection in order for them not to be more at risk.
Well, I want to repeat that so that people understand this at home. So you might have a condition that in normal times poses you no difficulty, but in the middle of a pandemic, it puts you at greater risk for health problems.
That is correct. And the CDC has actually even talked about it and stating that people who have liver disease, severe asthma, diabetes, autoimmune issues need to be very careful. So they're in a different situation than they probably ever have been.
Right.
They've had to not have to need any kind of, accommodations at work. And now they really have to think about all this before returning to work.
Very good. Now, would this include also age, as people are being warned over 60, over 65?
Absolutely. So they have to take that in consideration, if they're older and they're not in good health or they have some challenges, they really need to talk to their doctor about that to see, their job responsibilities, who they're around at work, do they have, customers they're in contact with, do they need to take extra protection?
Got it. Now, you've literally written about this, so you are in a great position. A bit more about what we do as we're returning to work, being asked to return to work, the kinds of things that we need to think about, and how to make all of that happen for us. And the first phase you say is research. Can you explain?
So you really want to research the type of accommodations that you need at work, and everybody has different situations. So it may be that you need to telework in order to not be around people, but you have to be able to do they call it essential functions, but it's the main functions of your job. So it could be that you have job restructuring, modified work schedules, but everybody's different. And there's Job Accommodation Network and the Northwest ADA Center that you can call, and they can actually help you research the type of accommodations you need for your specific situation.
You also say the second step is to prepare. What does that involve? That's
really important. So when you prepare, that means that you want to look at, do you want to write a letter? Do you want to verbally request it? It depends. You're going to, if you have a more of a casual atmosphere and you have a good relationship with your manager, you may want to verbally request. Or if you're in a larger corporation and they want you to do a written request. And what the important part is if there is an accommodation you feel that will work, explain how you can perform the main functions of your job with this accommodation. So really, you're always selling yourself at work. So it's the same thing. You're selling yourself on how this change or modification that you want to implement at work to meet your goals is going to work for not only you, but your employer.
Got it. And the third step is then to request it, to officially ask if this can be done.
Right. And, I always say, wherever you feel most comfortable. I mean, some people want to do it in writing. Some people want to do it verbally, but you always want to follow up on an email and documentation because there's always miscommunication, whether it's the employer or the employee side, that's some miscommunication. So the more that you have some sort of documentation that you can follow up with so that they understand too, especially if it's verbal, what you were asking for and how it'll benefit both parties.
Got it. And then finally, to negotiate is the fourth step, to be willing to go back and forth and figure out what you can do together.
Right. And that is one of the biggest misconceptions about accommodations is that, okay, you have accommodation that works and that's great. I would say for the real straightforward ones, but a lot of times it's a trial and error, especially like if these are people with health conditions that have never had to request accommodation, they probably don't even know exactly what they need and how it's going to work. So you've got to be able to be really open and communicate and be creative. It's so much creativity, but it works. But just know that it can happen 2 or 3 times before you actually find the right one. And again, whatever you implement, that you really effectively communicate with the employer if it's working or not and what isn't working.
I would ask people to take a look at your book, and can you show that to real quick?
Sure.
And you've got a workbook as well for employees, although this applies to employers and employees. But here's my question. So a lot of people are just, there's massive unemployment. They don't want to lose their job. They don't want to be a problem. They may be hesitant to put themselves there and ask for an accommodation. They may not know what the federal regulations are or what the Washington state law is. So can you talk to me a little bit about that?
Sure. So the ADA Title I states that an individual has a current or physical impairment that substantially limits a major life activity. So let's say it can be sitting, seeing, concentrating, walking, hearing, even the bodily immune functions like your immune system, reproductive system, your cardiovascular disease. When you're limited versus the general population, then you have an ADA disability. So then you look at what kind of limitations and barriers do you have at work in order to overcome those. The ADA Title I protects individuals. They have a right under the ADA to request an accommodation and from being discriminated against. And the key is most companies have a general understanding of this. But what I find is the more the employee understands the process, understands the law. Now, just the difference in Washington is that the ADA says 15 or more employees, a company has 50 or more employees are protected under the ADA. Washington state says 8 or more. If an organization has 8 or more employees, they are protected under the ADA. So that's just the difference. And they include sensory impairments, which is, very sensitive to light, sound, hearing, touch. A lot of people on the autism spectrum have that, but there are a lot of other health conditions that have the same thing.
And there are also just cases of things that seem more ordinary, correct? If you have asthmatic bronchitis, and normally that's no big deal. You use a respiratory inhaler or something like that. But you're 64 and now you're going back to work with the general public. That's a whole different scenario than it was before.
Absolutely. And it's okay to ask for an accommodation. That's what I'm trying to get away from too. We all want to do our jobs as well as we can in the most effective manner. And people need changes and modifications to meet their goals. It's okay. The thing is, you still have to do the main functions. You just may do them differently, but that's okay. And what I see a lot is people will see somebody with an accommodation and they'll realize somebody who doesn't have an ADA disability will realize that that's the best way for them to do it also. It really helps the whole company. It helps everybody when people are working the most effective way that they can.
Thank you to Sheryl, and you can find a link to Sheryl's employee handbook and all the help that you might need on our website. When we come back,